Okay, so let me get this out of the way. Okay, so yes, this is part two from my presentation on Friday. It's about breaking down bullying. Last on Friday, it was from the victim's perspective. This time, it's from the bully's perspective. Once again, I'm Joel. I have an MS in clinical mental health counseling, a bachelor's of science in psychology. I am a qualified mental health professional community service person, I guess. Um, that means I'm a case manager for adults at Pecan Valley Center's mental health facility. So can be said I know what I'm talking about. So first things first, trigger warning. Yes. This presentation contains descriptive information about the effects of bullying from the bully's perspective, such as the impact of past actions. Oops. There we go. Okay, this would. Past actions and mental toll from guilt and consequences. The topics discussed in this presentation panel may be intense and have very real effects on some people. By choosing to stay for this presentation, you are accepting of these risks and will not hold me, fans, ACON, or any other group liable for any distress. There will also be spoilers for Naruto, Naruto Shippuden, and the movie A Silent Voice. So I'm giving you guys 5 seconds. If you haven't seen either of those things, get out now. Yes.
I've read the manga but not seen the movie for A Silent Voice. Should I still get out or?
I mean, if you know the story of A Silent Voice, then you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, we all good? We all good. First things first. This is a question for the community, for the people here. Have you been made fun of for your interests? Make some noise. Yeah. Have you known anyone to be made fun of for their interests?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Were you ever defended for liking certain things? You specifically.
No.
Did you defend anyone for liking certain things?
Yes.
Okay. For those last two questions, I heard a no very basically for everyone. But for that last question, what was it like to, I'm not asking for an explanation, but what was it like to defend somebody who was liking a certain thing, they got bullied and you stepped in and you were just like, no, we're not going to do that. What was that like? Feelings, yes.
Kind of confrontational. Two different situations. One with my own daughter, which stepping in as like a parental figure is a lot different.
Yes.
Because I'm like going, hey, let's not be jackasses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, grow up to be normal people.
Yeah.
But as like a person to another person, like, hey, people are allowed to like things. It's intimidating in a way.
Right. Okay.
You ostentatious, it's honorable.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, it's sort of like having been on the receiving end in the past and then trying to defend in the future. It's like I have more like maturity. As I've matured, it's like a little. I have more confidence in doing that, but it's also like I still feel really nervous after trying to defend someone because I'm just so used to being like, oh no, how are they gonna respond back?
Okay. So varying views on this. It was kind of difficult, confrontational, kind of nervous about it, but it was also very honorable to step in for that person. Yes. Well, in this presentation, these guys really didn't do any of that. Not really, at least not in the beginning. So let's see. I'm gonna do summaries real quick. Naruto, Naruto Shippuden. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to assume everybody has seen the show. Yes? Yes? Okay. So you guys know the story of that. Basically, little boy got sealed with a demon. Everybody hates him for it. He's like, no, I want to show my worth. And so he works really, really hard, saves the village, saves the world, becomes Hokage. Now for a silent voice, I'll actually go into this. A deaf elementary school girl, Shoko Nishimiya, upon transferring, meets a boy, that guy on top, named Shoya Ishida in her new class. Shoya, who is not deaf, leaves the class and bullying Shoko because she is deaf. No other reason. As the bullying continues, the class starts to bully Shoya for bullying Shoko. After graduating from elementary school, Shoko and Shoya do not speak to each other until later when Shoya, tormented over his past, decides he must see Shoko once and for all. Once more, Shoya wants to make amends for what he did in elementary school and be Shoko's friend. So, a question here. The bullies that bullied you in the past when you were small little things, when you grew up to be big little things, did you guys become friends, meet up again, and what was that experience like? No. I saw a maybe over here. What's the maybe?
Okay, so I've been on both ends of the spectrum. I think for me, when it comes to being like a bully, some people do it just for the sake of bullying, and some people do it so you don't get bullied next.
Ah, okay.
So kind of like proud mentality, you said.
Yes.
Like
That's, I mean, that makes sense, I guess.
but then in like the case of going, or at least defending against the bully, or being like, hey, I'm sorry I did something bad, because one of our friends actually like we kind of poke fun a little bit, but after a certain time, it's like, nah, like this has gone far enough, like we're done here. And I was like, I'm very sorry, and we still chat from like every so often, so
I
it's
get
not awkward or anything.
Okay.
I get the feeling that most of my past bullies wouldn't even remember who I am at this point. Because it wasn't like a deep emotional like hatred towards me. It was just a thing for them to do in past time.
Well, Shoya, he very much remembers his bullying. What was her name? Nishira, I believe it was. Shoko and Shoya. He remembers what he did to her and the guilt surrounding that. And I'll get into the story of that a little bit later, but he is very, very regretful, like painfully regretful for what he did, and he wants to make it right. Will he, though? Victims and bully perspective. So, from the victim side, Naruto. He was bullied for characteristics he had no control over, i.e., being sealed away. A demon, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful demon in their world, was sealed away against his will when he was a literal baby. Like, first day of his life. That's what happened. The people of his homeland rejected him at a fundamental level and did not see him as a human. Some groups actually saw him as a resource. Chose to fight the bullying by being a force of good and not the monster people made him out to be. Bully side, Shoya, completely opposites of this. He bullied Shoko for a characteristic she had no control over. Despite the kindness Shoko displayed, Shoya instead chose to multiply the intensity of his bullying. It was only after she left did he realize the gravity of his actions, and guilt over them began to grow as the years passed on. So a little bit of an explanation on that, which I'll be getting into the next slide. Character breakdown. What he stood to gain from bullying Shoko, what actually occurred, unintended consequences. So what he stood to gain, at least in his mind, was acceptance from his peers who were also bullying her, power over those he perceived less than himself, because, Shoko was very different. She was completely deaf in 1 year. She had a hearing aid in another year. So when they were bullying her, she could hear it to a point. And then, of course, leading the charge against Shoko. Power for him, leadership position was very, very important to him. At least this is how he thought that was going to be. So, like I said, she had a hearing aid in her ear. Does anybody know how expensive a hearing aid can be, just generally? Yes. What's the number? Range. Give me a range. Yep. Anybody else?
Depends on which one you go. You go to Wi-Fi or $10,000-$15,000 plus search implant costs.
Okay. Well, let me put it in perspective for this movie. So, one of the main things that he did, ripped the hearing aid out of her ear and chucked it through a window multiple times. 8 times to be precise. Yes, 8 times. And 8 times that the family had to replace it until finally they just left because they couldn't take it anymore. Now, whenever this came to light, obviously he got called to the principal's office. They were just like, what the hell did you do? Why did you do all this? They saddled his parents with the bill. Shoya's parents with the bill. The damages, $30,000. Let's let that sink in for a second. A child who was, I believe, in either 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, his parents now had a $30,000 debt due to his actions. By Texas standards, 30,000 damages in personal property, that is equal to a third-degree felony. A child committing a third-degree felony. And the price for that is 2 to 10 years of jail time, plus on top of the 30,000, a $10,000 fee. So if he was in the US, he'd be saddled with $40,000 in fees and probably up to 10 years of jail time. Due to this, due to the amount of damages he did, not only just financially, but just mentally, on top of all the backlash bullying that happened to him, he grew to regret and feel guilt over his past actions. He became a recluse. He became a shut-in. A lot of self-doubt and anxiety became mainstays in his life. That which he was bullying somebody over because Shoko had a lot of self-doubt in herself. She was anxious. She was shy. She was different. Now all of that came back on him, and he became the shut-in. He became the anxious one, shy one, not really wanting to face anybody. Backlash is really real when it comes to this type of thing. Facing the music. Guilt and regret are powerful emotions. Let me ask you, anytime that you made a mistake, for example, when you were a kid, did everybody here at least break something when they were kids?
Oh, yes.
Did you break something of your parents when you were a kid?
Yes.
Now, did they find out immediately?
Yeah.
Sometimes. Sometimes. In the sometimes moments, did you feel guilt? Was it like a deep, intense guilt? Okay.
Yeah.
Same thing with this. Unintended consequences of this. He was shunned by all his peers and friends who he led the charge against Shoko with. Now they turned against him and decided to bully him for it. Society itself, his neighborhood, his town, thought worse of him for it. A personal consequence, he retreated inward. He became a recluse, like I said. Another personal consequence was that he could not face the public due to his guilt and self-hate. A guilt complex, which is what he had, can lead to feelings of anxiety, depression, and stress, including difficulty sleeping, loss of interest, and social withdrawal, which is all things that happened to him. A guilt complex can have a serious impact on a person's overall well-being. Over time, people may begin to develop a sense of inadequacy that makes it difficult for them to pursue goals. They may feel that they don't deserve to move on and may engage in behaviors designed to punish themselves for their mistakes. That is exactly what happened to him. Now, I don't know if this is going to work. Come on. Oh boy. Okay, so that was supposed to be a video. Basically, what it was that it was a clip about him coming to terms with the fact that, you know, he did something terrible. Everybody started to walk away from him, and he decided, okay, well, I want to avoid all of this, so I'm just going to be recluse. Cut to him going to high school. Now, anytime he walks through the halls, whenever he looks at anybody, he doesn't see their face. It shows that there's X's over the people's face. He cannot look anybody in the eye. And it shows him walking through a hallway. Nobody's really paying attention to him. No one really cares. But he's walking through a hallway thinking that everybody's judging him and making him feel guilty. There's X's on everybody's face. And it gets to be too much and he closes off his ears. So sensory overload, plus guilt, plus regret, plus social anxiety, it didn't end up with a good thing for him. So that was his consequence. Let me see if I can. I don't know if I can. If this would load. I didn't think so. Okay. Whatever. All right. My next presentation at 1 is actually going to be more about social anxiety, but let me give you a brief summarization of this. Diagnosis from the DSM, which is the diagnostic manual for mental health disorders, is marked fear or anxiety about one or more social situations in which the individual is exposed to possible scrutiny by others, Examples include social interactions, having a conversation, meeting unfamiliar people, being observed, and performing in front of others. Characteristics: the social situations are avoided or endured with intense fear or anxiety. The fear, anxiety, or avoidance is persistent, typically lasting for 6 months or more. Scheuer's perceptions: he did not believe he was worthy of happiness. He was incredibly self-critical and doubtful of every action that he made and the actions of other people, but mainly himself. He had outbursts of emotions that he could not explain, from varying from just anger outbursts to just breaking down crying for absolutely no reason. Now, with all this explanation, who here feels like they may have this? Be honest, this is a safe space. Yes. To those who thankfully answered yes to that, if you want to, could you explain what makes you believe that you have this? Yes.
I have OCD, so a lot of the self-doubt, the self-hatred, I feel all, obviously I didn't, wasn't as much of a turd as he was growing up, but as you're aware with OCD, just your whole life distorts what you think and constantly holds you liable for what you did in the past.
That last point distorts what you think and makes you held liable for your past. That's exactly what he was going through. He could not make any decision in his life without doubting the motive behind it. Even if it was his own decision, he refused to just go forward with it. He had to really, really think about it because he knew, painfully knew, that every action that he did had an unintended consequence. He did not want to put himself in a situation like that again, what he did when he was a kid. So crippling self-doubt, that's what plagued him. Now then, character breakdown Naruto. What he could have done in his situation, what he chose to do, and what occurred as a result. He was ridiculed, hated, scorned, and abused by most everyone in his village. By rights, he could have been on the warpath and razed the village to ash. Quite easily he could have, and he had multiple opportunities to do this. Instead, he chose to be better. He chose to be better. To be a force of good as demonstrated by his sensei turned father figure, Iruka. Now, a point about him, Iruka, due to the Nine Tails influence, Iruka lost his parents to the Nine Tails. And then the Nine Tails went to reside in Naruto. You would think of all people that Iruka would take out his anger against Naruto. Because again, he, in some level, had justification to do so, at least against the Nine Tails. He didn't. He was asked by the third Hokage to be like, no, watch over the boy. Of all the people in this village, I trust you to be the one to do it, even though the Nine Tails killed your parents. Because now you can understand where he's coming from. So Iruka at first resisted, but then he realized what a situation Naruto was going to be, and he was just like, okay, fine, I'll do it. And from then on, he was essentially his babysitter, cleaning up after his messes, apologizing for Naruto no matter what he did, from defacing the town's greatest monuments to running around pulling pranks on people. Iruka closely followed behind him, and most every day, they went to the famous ramen shop and just ate ramen whenever he needed to calm down. Now, it was because of his influence, because of his continued care and worry over Naruto, that Naruto realized, okay, somebody does care. How can I be like them? It got to the point, and I know I'm just reciting things here, but he got to the point where Iruka literally had a giant shuriken stuck into his spine for defending Naruto, and he didn't regret it, not for a minute. He was about to die, and in his dying breath, Iruka was just like, no, he's gonna be one of the greatest ninjas, if not the greatest ninja in the future, and I stake my life on that. And it turned out to be true. As a result, he became the hero of his village after defeating Pain, and then the savior of the world after being basically the driving force for the Fourth Great Ninja War. At the end of all this, he became the seventh Hokage, greatest leader of his time, the leader of the village. He got the respect that he wanted, but he also understood that there was responsibilities for it. So he had all the power and all the time in the world to turn into the villain, to turn into a Sasuke. He could have. He chose not to because he chose to be better. There was another video on this, but because I can't do videos, I'll skip over it. It was basically the whole interaction between Naruto and Pain. I showed this on Friday. Pain basically asked Naruto, why is it that you think that you can't change? Why is it do you think that the pain around the world that was inflicted on you and the pain around the world won't change you? And he was just like, my name was given to me by my mentor, Jiraiya. And that name was taken from a book that he wrote, a character in his book, who was all about being the force of good, being, better, being the savior of the world. And that character was based off of Pain. Pain and Naruto were both students of Jiraiya, Pain before Naruto. And Jiraiya based a character of his hero story off of Pain, but the name change was Naruto. I know that's convoluted, but point is, he was just like, the character in this book was a hero who knew that the only way the world could change was if he was doing better. And so Naruto tells Pain, that's what my name means. My master gifted me my name, and I cannot, in good faith, besmirch that name just in the name of my petty revenge. Not petty, but justifiable revenge. I'm not going to sully my name, and so that's the reason I'm not going to kill you. And he had fully admits, after hearing Pain's story, as much as I understand your story, I still want to kill you. But he chose to be better. That's the point here. Processing the consequences. Change and evolution, owning up to his actions, choosing to learn from his mistakes, and learning to empathize with people instead of making rash judgments. After getting into high school, Shoya decided to right his wrongs as best as he could and went to Shoko to return some property he had taken from her. A notebook that he taken from her, which held like all of her notes, her dreams, and stuff like that. He took that from her when he was a kid, held on to it all this time, and was able to give it back to her. He learned sign language just to communicate with her. Just so that he can get his point across to her clearly. He learned sign language after mocking her for trying sign language when they were kids. Over time throughout the movie, he learned how to empathize with people, to understand the pain and loneliness that not only he felt, but other people felt. He grew to understand his actions had consequences, and he did indeed have to own up to them. Despite this, his past, regardless of how inhumane, did not define who he was and what he did with the present. Let me say that again. Despite how terrible he was, how much of a little shit he was in the past, it did not define what he did with his present. It influenced it, but did not define it. He chose to be better. Through his insistence for acceptance and positive change, those people who bullied alongside of him also changed for the better. There was a girl who was basically his co-captain in bullying, who really didn't change. She was a bully then, she was a bully now, whenever they were older. And then whenever she saw Shoya the next time when they were older, speaking to Shoko as an equal, doing sign language with her, the girl bully was just like, what are you doing? Don't you realize how much of a weirdo she was? How much of a freak she was? And he was just like, no, I'm not doing that again. I'm not playing that game again with any of you. And through his insistence, she also learned sign language. She also began to learn sign language, even though begrudgingly. She was, at the very end of the movie, she was like, getting onto her case that they were going to be late, and she signed at her like, hey, we're going to be late. And they all looked at her and they were just like, what? And she was like, yeah, I'm doing it too. I'm not going to be left behind. I want to communicate with her too. So because he chose to be better, positive change was made. Now there is a point here. The initial reason why he wanted to make, and this is a trigger warning, the initial reason why he wanted to make right by the people he wronged was as soon as he was done, he was going to commit suicide. That was his initial reasoning. He wanted to make amends. He wanted to clear his conscience. He wanted to make sure the Shoko was okay, give back everything that he did, and then kill himself. But because of the experiences he made, he went through with her, he realized that's not the way out of it. He had to own up to it and be better. Consequences for Naruto. It went from a perceived monster to an adored hero to a beloved leader. Chose to take on the hatred of the world rather than add to the system that rejected him, and refused to compromise on his moral code, even if it was the logical choice to do so. His ninja way was he was never going to stop fighting for those who needed to fight. That was his other like mantra throughout the first series, was that this is my ninja way. I will never turn my back on a friend. I'll never turn my back on a person who needs help. He saw the problem of hatred and anger in the world and chose to shoulder it and cleanse the world through positive change and action, despite the fact that the world rejected him. There is a nice, I don't know if I'm about to use the word right, dichotomy between him and Pain. Similar people, similar backstories, where the world rejected them based off characteristics that they never wanted. Pain, instead of choosing to, better the world, he chose to destroy the world. He wanted to destroy the world that rejected him. Naruto instead chose, no, I'm going to face the hatred. I'm going to get rid of it with positive change. So it was a really nice parallel between the two. Now, despite having all the right to go after everyone who wronged him, killed all the people that killed his friends and mentors, and even Pain, who destroyed his village, he didn't waver in his convictions. Almost did, but he came back. In his eyes, if he had chose to go down the route Pain did, he would become the monster everyone claimed that he was, as well as it being a slap in the face to everybody who had faith in him. The only reason Tsunade became fourth Hokage, or fourth or fifth, whatever, fifth Hokage, was because she put her faith in Naruto for his statement of, I'm going to make sure the world is better. If he had gone down the Pain route, that would have been a slap in the face to her. That would have been a slap in the face to Jiraiya, Iruka, everybody. And he knew that. And he chose to be better. Growing past the trauma. So now I'm going to go into real world application. There's a lot of information, a lot of data for how a person can grow past the trauma. A big part of it is go to therapy. Please go to therapy. That's a big part of it. But if you can't afford therapy, at least in the beginning, setting a goal and going after it, and learning to forgive oneself and accept one's past. The first part is fairly simple, I would say. Both of these characters had a goal in mind. One was to change the world for the better. One was to make amends for his past actions. Both of these characters achieved their goals, but also learned to accept and love themselves for who they were so that they could become forces of good for those around them. Setting a goal for positive change is a good goal, but how can you be an effective agent of positive change when you can't make a positive remark of your own character? How can you sit here and tell your friend that they're a good person whenever you get in front of a mirror, all you see is a mass of, acid and hate? How can you say that? What justification can you use to tell a friend, you're amazing, you're great, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, and then turning around and telling yourself, no, you're not. You're just trash, you're garbage. You can't justify that. As much as, and trust me, I know that really well because that was me for a time too. But a big part of both of those characters, like I said, is they learn to forgive themselves and accept their past. Now, a question here. How many of you have a dark or checkered past? Or a past that you may regret? Yes. Okay. Have you learned to forgive yourself for those mistakes? Yes?
I'm working on it.
Yes,
Same.
absolutely. To those of you who said yes, that you've learned to forgive yourself, was it easy? No. Did you go through a hard struggle just to get to the point where you were able to forgive yourself? Okay. Now, one more question. You may have forgiven yourself, but have you accepted what you did in the past? Okay, good. It's yes or no. Okay. It's a process. It's a process to not only forgive yourself, but also to accept the past. But it can be done. Real world application. The cycle of hatred, what can be done, and how to address the pain and hatred. So, what is the cycle of hatred? Before I get into it, can anybody define what the cycle of hatred is? Yes.
Every action has a every action has an equal and excessive reaction. I get hurt, I hurt me more. You get hurt, you hurt me more. And we keep doing it until everyone's dead.
Yes. That's honestly really perfect. Anybody else have any other interpretations of this? Yes.
Your self-loathing builds up on itself, so you keep hating on yourself. Why do I do this? Then that builds up into more negativity, and that negativity feeds into a cycle where you're just constantly getting lower and lower and lower yourself.
Yes.
So more of an internal as opposed to external.
The cycle of hatred is both external and internal. As much as it is outside, it's inside too. Negativity attracts more negativity. It's very true. Like what you said, you hurt me, I hurt you hurt me more, I'm gonna hurt you more, so on and 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 so on. Positive energy attracts more positive energy. It's very true. To a point. And it's really sad that I have to make that mark that positive energy attracts positive energy, kind of. The absence of positivity breeds, fosters, and creates negativity. So the example here is, what is darkness if not the absence of light? You know, because it's an empty void, but as soon as you shine a light in it, it's full of that light. Same thing with this. A person could be filled of hatred and anger and despair and spite. But one small positive action could be all that's holding them from diving deep into that or going over a cliff. One positive thing. Let me ask you, as fellow geeks and nerds here, how many of you can say that anime, manga, comics, or whatever was that one of the few things that kept you guys sane? Yes. Yes. Or a little bit better, was what kept you, was a companion towards you whenever you felt lonely, was something that you could fall back on and be like, despite my loneliness, I feel good while I'm reading or watching this thing. How many? Yes. Yes. And that's a big part of it. Getting revenge on a person does not eliminate the action. It only adds more negativity to the situation when you first started. In both characters, had they continued the cycle of both of their world, this cycle, both of their worlds would have been worse off for it. Naruto's world would have been destroyed. Shoya's and Shoko's would have only been hurt further. And Shoya would have died. What can be done for the cycle of hatred? Learn to accept the past. Choosing to forgive is entirely up to you. You can accept that somebody did an action to you, but it's up to you whether or not you choose to forgive them. What's the important point here is to learn to let go of the emotions that you feel towards them. So for example, the bully perspective, you go into therapy and a part of it is trauma from the bully that maybe like pushed you into a locker, continued to insult you throughout pre-K through 12, and you get into therapy. Some therapists would tell you, I'm not saying all therapists because some therapists have their own way of doing things, but at least for me, I would tell you, okay, let's visit that memory, remember it, imagine it, go back to it. Now accept that it happened. Nothing you can do can change it, but learn to step out of that memory. Because what it's doing is that that memory has a part of you gripping it in the past. What you're trying to do is take that part back and then move forward. I'm not asking you to forgive the person. You may never be able to forgive that person, but at least it doesn't have a hold over you anymore. You can look back on that memory and think, yeah, it happened, but so what? Instead of looking at the memory and being like, oh my God, I want to strangle that person. That's the difference. What would that look like, for example, for just a thought, if you looked at a traumatic memory and instead of, feeling the slashes across your arm, feeling the slashes on your back, you look at the memory and think, so what? What would that feel like? What would that feel like?
Apathy.
Yeah. Apathy, but also relief. True. I guess I was saying when you look at it and you think, so what? It doesn't affect me anymore. It happened. Sure, absolutely it happened. But I'm not going to feel anger or hatred to it anymore because it doesn't have power over me. Yes.
And if you're lucky enough, you look back and say, I survived it, it got better.
Yes. Absolutely.
If you're lucky enough.
If you're lucky enough. But I have a firm belief that everybody can get to that point. It takes time. Some people can get to that point a lot faster than others. Some people still haven't gotten to that point. So learning to accept the past, choosing to forgive is entirely up to you. Rising above those who would bring you down. And this is the tagline for this presentation. If you want to take anything from this presentation, it's this: choosing to be and doing better. What would you gain if you were to go to their bully's level and bully somebody else? What would happen? Honestly. Would you stand to gain anything? You would become the thing that you hate. But if somebody were to irritate you, somebody was to push your buttons, and you decided, I'm not going to let them affect me, and move on, what do you gain then? What do you gain from that if you choose to move forward from them? Yes, an increase in your self-worth, growth, and potentially having them rethink their actions. How would you address the pain and hatred? As a start, seek out therapy, please. Learning to acknowledge the events of the past is painful, but a fulfilling process. I can't speak for everyone here, but I can tell you from a personal experience, I also went through horrible trauma, physical abuse, emotional abuse, the entire thing. And I learned to process that. It was hard, it was difficult. I re-went through the memories again, pain again, all over again. But as soon as I got through it, I have never felt as happy and as free as I did after the fact. That's just my experience. It could be completely different for all of you, but I had never felt so free. And that's what I hope happens if you guys decide to go and face your trauma again. Learning to take back control of the parts of you that were lost to your trauma and anger and hatred is a part of trauma-based therapy. Becoming whole again and moving forward in life is the end result. And again, reminding yourself to be and do better. So that sources. Last bit here is that QR code takes you to a link to all of the mental health facilities all throughout Texas. If you're wanting to find a place somewhere, start to address your mental health concerns, that's the link for it. They're everywhere. Every county, every area in Texas has a mental health authority that you can go to. Usually they have like sliding scale fees that if you don't have insurance, if you don't have any of that, or low income, they will help you. Some people, like for example, at least for the place that I work at, we have so many homeless people who don't have jobs, who can get medication, who can get therapy, who can get mental health aid for nothing. It is possible. There is help out there, only if you choose to decide to get it.